I write poetry because it is a language to me. It is my love language. It's the way I use to convey how I feel to people and, you know, bring them into a little bit of the world, the way I perceive the world.
Yeah, I think poetry is definitely, like a lot of other art forms, it's like an expression of the soul. And so it's a good way for me to try to understand myself and understand the world. I think sort of reflect on everything.
For me, it's like a way of remembering what I felt, and like it's a way to know myself more. And like you said, it's like where you get to express who you are and everything.
For me, it's like a form of clarity, because when I write poetry, it allows me to see my experience and validate it, not just as from a person in the present looking back at the past, but a person who's now looking at it and expressing it as if it's happening in real time.
I definitely agree with you. I think with poetry, it's such a unique perspective in life when you're a poet, because it's like you can visually see words around you, words on walls, words in the sky, words in power lines, and I just think that it's just such an overwhelmingly great experience when you could just sit there and you just boom, like you can just allow other people to picture the words around you as well.
Yeah. For me, I write poetry because I'm able to express myself through words that I can tell to the public and imagery instead of me visually or verbally saying it.
Yeah, along with self-expression, I think poetry is very universal. It's a way that you can connect with the people around you and the communities around you.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. Like, poetry really does help you express yourself, but it also gives society kind of an in-look as to what you believe and your perspective on the world around you.
How do you guys feel about poetry being taught in classrooms?
Honestly, I think that it's a healthy way for students to express themselves. I think in schools, we always had the conversation of, oh, like, don't bully and stuff like that. But we've never had a conversation of, like, okay, instead of, like, communicating this way, here's some other effective ways to communicate to other people. Or even when it comes to, like, communicating with yourself, acknowledging how you feel. I think poetry definitely helps with that.
I definitely agree with you, but I mean, for me, I feel like the way poetry is being taught in schools as of today is a little bit restrictive. Yeah. I remember growing up reading about Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah. He's a great guy, but come on, he's from the 1700s, 1800s, I don't know what decade, and you know, and the humor's outdated, the story's outdated, you know, it got a little bit of angst in there, great, but it doesn't really resonate with me. And the way I was taught to write poetry was you have to have 8 parameters, you have to have this many syllables. I remember writing a poem and I got a D on the assignment because I didn't have enough rhymes in my poem. And so I'm just astounded. I dislike the restrictive barriers placed into poetry. To me, poetry is personal. Yeah. You shouldn't be forced to center your idea on one perception. Every poem is personal, not just personal to the author who wrote them, but personal to the audience. You get to define how you interpret each poem you read and how you interpret each poem you write. And that is...
Sorry, I think I misunderstood.
No, it's okay.
It's so I definitely agree with what you're saying. It's like, I think it especially affects us, like, as women of color. Like, we already feel so disconnected, but it's also like, when it comes to poetry, you're definitely right. There shouldn't be so many, like, rules or parameters around it because it's just raw expression of your soul.
Right.
And I think we also need to, like, figure out what's being taught in schools and what types of sources. Because I think, like, it's ridiculous that we're still, like, studying the same thing for, like, hundreds of years. Like, I get it. They're amazing. Don't get me wrong. But it's, like, things change, times change, and we want representation too, right?
And it becomes kind of inhibiting. Like, I didn't really start writing poetry until this year because I thought, oh, I can't be a poet. Because poets, you know, it seemed very mathematical. All of the structure, all of the rhymes, I was like, I can't do that. Yeah. But then I started writing poems without even calling them poems because I was like, I just sort of need to get my soul out there. I just need it. And then after a while I realized, oh, I am a poet. But it's in a different way. And so I feel like it's still probably good to learn about that structure, and, you know, some of us may start writing like that, but to also have those other options to know that poetry can't be defined by like one, you know, set of rhymes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like Cassandra was saying, I think in school, to me, poetry is a way of freedom too. So I think in school it should be presented as a choice. A choice of a way of expressing yourself. And you can choose this avenue, or you can choose perhaps like fiction writing, or maybe you can choose other things. Or maybe you don't want to express yourself in a literary way. Maybe you want to make music or interpretive dance or something. And I think, like you were saying, it shouldn't be a rigid set of rules, but really just one path that you can follow.
I agree. I feel like poetry should be encouraged within the school curriculum, especially creative writing courses in the school. So for example, my school recently started the elective creative writing, and it got a lot of great promotion. A lot of people really engaged in it. So I feel like if that was to be incorporated within the school curriculum, a lot of people would really start to enjoy poetry.
Yeah, since poetry does have a lot of history in it, I think when schools teach poetry, we should also include people of color and the different things in history that have happened within this poetry.
Well, poetry is, like you guys were talking about, it's like a piece of history. And, you know, yeah, sure, white guy, old times. Yeah, right, that was a long time ago, but now we have so many other voices. We have women of color. We have so many different stories to tell. And I think in school, they're always teaching us, like, poetry, you have to do this and that. This is right, this is wrong. But poetry is an art form, and, you know, whatever you want to use, whatever you want to say through the art form shouldn't be right, shouldn't be wrong, because everything is just yours, and it's right no matter what you say.
Insanely important. Poetry can be used as a protest. And, you know, part of what we're doing here today, of course, is about climate change. But on a higher level, we're living in an era of turmoil and conflict, right? And poetry, I feel like it is more neutral and more beautiful than debate, because it brings a sort of lyrical sense into an argument. And that's why I feel like poetry, for a lot of people, is easier to digest than if you were to argue with them. You just give them a poem, and it's like a big mic drop.
The thing with debate is that in arguments, that when you argue, you're combating the other person.
Right.
But I think with poetry, you're just expressing your personal experience, and that's furthering empathy into the conversation.
I think it's when a poet is able to artistically write whatever they feel in a rhythmical manner, because you can see there's rhythm in whatever they do. And even if it's just a line, it just feels magical.
Yeah, I think in poetry, it's not only the surface level, but there's always a deeper meaning to what you're trying to say. There's always symbolism that your reader might be able to view from what you wrote.
Yeah, adding on to what Jescent and Cassandra was saying, every point in history is always going to be a turning point. There's always something we can do. And as long as we have math and we have science and we have all of these other things, we're always going to need poetry as well.
Well, just like you guys were talking about, like, I think poetry is so important, and it's a way to bring people together. It's not just like, you know, like debates, people get angry, and this is more like, look at me, look at my story, I'm watching your story, and we can come together.
Yeah, it's definitely a way to like reflect on our shared humanity, and I think that's so important. Right now, it's always been important, but our world is so divided that I think it's a good thing we're here.
Yeah. I feel like art and poetry is like a really like creative way to just be like vulnerable, you know,
It is
like wanting to like show a piece of yourself.
Yeah.
And like
And it might encourage other people to do the same and
yeah.
inspire conversations that can promote change. Sometimes there's like poetry in trees, and you were saying that earlier, but in flowers, like in different parts of nature, different parts of beauty. And I was thinking about this, we were talking about Anne of Green Gables earlier. I love Anne of Green Gables. And I think it's in the second book where Anne is in the forest and she says to her friends, oh, look at that poem. And they're like, what are you talking about? And she's like, it's over there. And they're like, well, I don't see any words written down. And she's like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how like the sun shines on that like branch, like over the water. Like that's poetry because it's beautiful and like it makes me feel. And I just feel like that's kind of
So romantic.
No,
So
so
beautiful.
I was having a talk with physics teacher yesterday at a party, and he tells me that physics reaches the point where you're applying objectivity to subjectivity. And in my head, I'm like, I need to write that as a poem. That is so beautiful, you know? Okay, yeah.
Science is so fascinating to me because it sort of seems like proven philosophy. And
Yes.
that's just...
Right.
Science is so poetic too.
I know.
I remember growing up, I was very scared of writing actually because people would look over my assignments and be like, dude, these sentences, this punctuation, all that. This is a random story, but basically this one guy who was standing and waiting in line for this homeless shelter, he saw me and he was like, hey, can you read this real quick? And I was like, okay. And it was a book that was about the Black Panther Party. And then he asked me questions on it. And I was like, I just remember leaving that. I'm like, did I just talk to a stranger? Not only that, did this stranger make me want to write more and ask questions about my surroundings and who I am and like even the political climate? Because even though I was doubting myself, that's when I finally was like, you know what, I'm going to try to read and write about this.
That's powerful.
Thank you. But how about you guys?
For me, my journey actually did not start with poetry. It started with narrative and creative and fictional writing. I started writing short stories when I was starting in elementary school. It wasn't until high school that I began in touch with poetry, and that's how I started my journey as a poet.
Yeah, I also started my poetry journey similarly. I was doing novel writing and short story writing before I got into poetry. So I only got into poetry in about 8th grade, but I remember one day I was just sitting down and I was trying to write a short story, and then my words just became poems because all I could think about was like the rhythm of the story and how it would sound better as a poem. Yeah.
So I remember I got inspired having to, in my place, we had to do like spoken poetry. Like I would just have to read a poem by someone, and you just have to like read it in a great whatever you want manner. And I think that was really cool. And since I was scared of singing, I preferred spoken poetry more. And by reading it first, I was like, I wanted to try what poetry was all about, and reading it to people, I think that was fun. And that was in elementary. And then in high school, that's when, or middle school actually, that's when a friend got me to like, oh yeah, you should try writing like all the time. And they would like bother me all the time that I had to just, okay, I'll just write every day. And he would make me write challenges every day that I just got used to it. And like whenever he stopped bothering me, I just, you know what, I feel like writing. And that's how it started for me.
Well, I'm personally still on my journey in poetry. I just recently got into it. But as long as I can remember, I've always been into like writing and reading. And I think just like looking at all the stories of the world, it kind of inspired me. So I actually started because I had an assignment at school to do poetry. And after I did it, I was like, this is fun. Like, I like this. I felt like I really expressed myself. I've written things before. I've written short stories, but poetry, like, it just connected more. So, yeah.
For me, I also started with narrative fiction and prose, but then when I tried to write longer pieces, like a novel or something, it never really worked out because it's so hard to map out a story that would last for so many pages and to stick with it. I started like manuscripts that'd be like 80 pages long, and then I scrapped them. So I think what I love about poetry is that it can be on a smaller scale, and I'm still able to express myself. And also with fiction, a lot of times I have to fabricate or make things up and think about what isn't there. But then in poetry, I'm shining a light on what is.
Oh, adding on to what you said, I agree with how novels are so long. I feel like this is why I prefer writing poetry more, is because like you can write in a short way and it's digestible and it's so powerful.
Yeah. And poetry also for me was also just like a way of coping. Like,
Yeah.
I only recently started like drawing like real like art. For like the longest time, I've mostly spent my time just observing art because I felt like with the social norms, like my art wasn't like really like, art. So, but like lately I started to like accept my art style, and I'm quite happy with it. I started drawing when my cousin from China, like he showed me his art, and I was like, wow, I was so amazed. I was like, wow, this person was like able to like make this like beautiful drawing with just, like a hand and a pencil. And like it just like inspired me to like start drawing myself.
Of course, one of the things that inspired me is science. I've written poems about, like infinities and the law of decomposition. Everything goes back to something else. Nothing ever disappears, right? I felt like that is a very poetic concept, but I love poetry because it gives a story to things that would otherwise not have a story. If you read a book or a novel, there's a climax somewhere. There's a plot. There's a narrative. If you read a speech, there is a purpose. There is an intention. But if you read a poem, it hyper-focuses on the branch, or like you said, the sunlight, going into the water, sunlight on the leaf, right? The leaf becomes the main character. The birds become the main character. The daisies become the main character. That is just so beautiful to me. Those objects, those tiny things would otherwise not have a story, but because you were a poet, you give them a story, and you give them something to be beautiful about. And also, I'm a little bit infatuated with people, and I focus a lot of my poems on people, but also about people imperfections. I like to write about skin. I like to write about, I like to write about slanted smiles. I like to write about people and laughter, and just it is a way for me to bring beauty in everything I can find. So that is what inspires me.
I love that so much. It's so beautiful.
I feel like all of you guys can relate to that.
Yeah.
As a poet, you just find the beauty in everything.
Nothing. Right? And I think that's important. When there's a lot of ugly, dark things in our world, it's important to find beauty, to keep going.
Yes.
And like a lot of other people here, I started writing more like novels and things, which I haven't finished a lot of them, but I plan on it. It's just so hard because there's always so many things we're supposed to be doing with school and everything. But I got into poetry just this year, really, and I think it was like a way of coping, like you said, because like coming out of quarantine, it's like, and all these crises that are going on, I felt like it was just sort of pouring out of me, and I couldn't even stop it. I would tell people about like my poetry problem, and they were like, "Oh, your poetry problem." I was like, "No, it's a problem. Like I can't do anything else right now except write poetry. Like my brain couldn't work in any other way." But then I think ultimately it was a healthy thing for me to do, because it's led me to a lot of opportunities, like this one, and meeting new people, and also just sort of, sometimes I feel like I don't even know what I'm going to write until I write it, or what I'm thinking until it's there. And so I think it's a very healthy way of self-expression and like discovery.
In Baker's Beach, love at the end of everything. It is May again, and everything becomes a new type of tender. We are teetering at the edge of summer, our youths golden and our skins raw like mango flesh. I watched you stare intensely into the coral blue of the ocean. Feet planted into soft bodies of sand, rolling over, you tell me that the world is ending. Corals left tooth white and boneless by climate change, glaciers melting like candle wax into the fade of every winter horizon. Still yet, nothing here has changed. Above us, looper moths circle the sky, spiraling in perfect halos. They falter under the moonlight, wings flinting between aluminum and copper gold. A plover lands on the neck of a tree, and the branch buckles under its weight. For miles around us, there is nothing but sage bushes and memories left by half-moon lovers. Eternal summers with infinities so large, not even we can find them. Maybe we are searching for something to name ourselves to. Maybe we believe that if we wait long enough, an answer will appear, washing up softly with the waves. Maybe the reason I look at you now is because I half expect to find that answer, or some version of it at least. You laughed, and your laughter quivers in the air like echolocation. It transforms into something sweet, taking flight in the shape of an angel-winged terp. I consider catching it for a moment, to cup it gently in the crease of my hands like I do with all things I am too afraid to lose. Instead, it slips away and withers off with the sound of trembling cicadas before any moment can reach it. If we stay here too long, we will erode with the mountains, become nothing but the fossils we find, old and bruising, forever left to tarnish in some forgotten history.
It does not matter any longer where you live. From news reports on the fires in California and the floods in Vietnam. 1. They waited for the answers they didn't want to hear but knew were reality. From my living room, I watch as tiny yellow men march into the worst darkness and pretend not to hear when they have names. Witness an unprecedented use of the word unprecedented. The state of California has swallowed Connecticut like fever, leaving behind a scorched footprint the shape of neglect. There are streetlights in the forest now. The forest is a city with wildfire for veins and a steady churn of smog. Vehicles spill onto highways to escape the color of death, but even the lucky ones wake up to smudged sun and sepia. Classic Western. Villainize nature, defend your honor, reduce the brown people to accessory. This is the work of a century's suppression, of a creature that feeds on its own dead. When there is nothing left to breathe, you produce the opposite of oxygen. Don't need a crystal ball. Return the trees to their cradles. Burn the land clean of history. Seethe warning, blaze insurrection. Do not slow, do not slow. Let them see the inferno they created. 2. Local residents now live in a way that is prepared for natural disaster. In the country my mother loves, in its naked heart, coastlines unravel into starving hands, drawing anything with mass into wet embrace. Include the slippers, whose tattered pockets kept our feet from catching wind, and the plastic collected to prove we exist. Include the caution tape, the bamboo, the dining tables, the books, the altars, the rice, the fields they grow in, the aoyai, the photos, and the children who have now found mothers in this soft earth. They say it sounds like a bomb, when the mountain that is not actually a mountain explodes, and it weeps burials for the willowed bodies who watch water rise to fool their conscience, who recite Buddha's name until synonymous with mosquito hum, who hold real hands in the dark of electricity while millions of hummingbirds crash into sheet metal roof and herds of baby elephants swarm at the ankles which, of course, the meteorologists will call rainfall, and the parents will call temporary, will call home free. Their only desire was to be together in the home they loved. The structures are empty now, either because the people fled or endured baptism by flame, flood. An elderly couple is found in the charcoal of their farm, a boy, recognized under comic shop sludge. The men on the news say climate change is a hoax. I talk back, hold the objects they inhabit, break them.
Oceans rising, temperatures reaching record highs, climate lies are so ingrained in our consciousness we aren't surprised when people say there is nothing we can do. We don't believe them, but we're not shocked when they don't believe. We just groan and weep our salt tears into a river of rage, heating up our bodies, becoming plastic. It's no wonder the acidity of politics is breaking down into microaggressions, polluting our world. Oceans rising, creatures dying, heads trapped in plastic bags, icebergs melting. We've seen the pictures since we were children. It's not surprising more aren't climbing off the escalator to hell. They say the current is too strong, but they don't reach out their hand to feel it, to see if that's true. Oceans rising, islands sinking, villagers burning trash and dying from toxic fumes. It's not talked about enough. Not nice to think about, will make you lose your appetite. But children are hungry in other countries and even our own, but we don't see it. Our culture looks for muscle, not for bone. Oceans rising, heating, bleeding, how sick she must feel. Some look to space for a way out, but we're too far in, too deep in chaos, flailing, failing to back out now. Oceans rising, how much more time have we for greedy old men to stop being so obsessed with pretty pieces of paper that they turn our world into plastic, cheap perfume of dust and chemicals tearing costly holes in the fabric of our atmosphere, pretending they can't hear the desperate screams of our mother and of her children.
The screaming of birds in the morning used to be songs. I wake up and the sunlight through the window is hazy. There is news playing on the television downstairs as nations begin to fall into chaos. As the planet heats up, so does the ocean. As coral reefs absorb the carbon dioxide from the air that we have polluted with our own greed, our own wrongdoings, they are blanched white and the ocean begins to die. Fish and other sea life are netted by the millions by fishers. With the passing of each minute, extinction unfolds globally. Well, the sun begins to fall over the edge of the horizon, you see. So we chase it. We chase it all the way to the edge until the sun has fallen and the stars have fallen too. When we sink into the ocean, we will find nothing but the bloated bodies of fish. When we try to find our way through the land, we will find nothing but impossible drought and wildfires. And Earth begins to split at the seams.
Stars wrap this planet and warp it as rhyming schemes in a sonnet. The silence plays like a clarinet in this universe of euphemism to hide this growing disconnect and dissent and this feeling of relent. I always ask the stars where you went. Tibet tells me our love is tainted, the love between us and the sun, the appreciation for the universe and her gift. It is the gift of perspective that gives way to the glass shards of introspective. Rainbows reflective off this surface. Entice me, you, and them. It's the creation of art sewn into introspective like him.
This poem is about my aunt in the Philippines. I'm a Filipino immigrant who just moved here for like 2 years, and this is dedicated to her. Text of radio waves, distances apart. Tita Liza has passed now, ate. June 10, 2020, 1:59 a.m. Scene. Text, a message received. There I was, awake, in the middle of the night. June 10th of 2020, where 3.7 million people died. It's just one death that hit the most. Like a chord or a note that struck me the most. COVID-19 caused millions of deaths. Oh, how the sick felt like they were drowning, fatigue, and of difficulty breathing. But then, here I was, just sitting, laying on the bed. I stopped breathing. All my thoughts just stopped talking, screaming, crying. Just a text message, a bunch of words mixed together. Is this all real? Was all I ponder. Drowning and drowning, I'm holding my breath. Breathe in, my body begs. Sadness filling in my lungs and heart. But if I breathe in, my body would just fall apart. 6,963 miles away from me, alone and lonely, drowning in the sea of emotions. Ear deafening, heavy feeling, breath holding.
It's suffocating. My aunt has left this world like a knife that stabbed me in the chest. Wounds heal, scars last. But this pain of knowing she's gone will scar me forever. 9 months have passed without new memories of her. The fear of losing someone dear, to lose everyone that was close to me. Oh, how I felt like I was drowning, and time moves so fast, yet my heart heaves so slow. My aunt in my mind, her words in my heart, memories and whispers, she's somewhere afar, and just like the breeze, her soul will be free. Her love and care, I hope, will guide me, and all my regrets and pains, while distances apart, will disintegrate to pieces, with her knowing a message sent saying, I love you, seen.
I fear the cobblestones. I fear the cement curbs and sidewalks. No, it is not because I am oversensitive. It is instead the fear I hold for me and those who risk their lives simply for walking on the streets under the coat of yellow skin. I fear to hear another dreadful news of blood ruthlessly splattered on the cold and heartless streets of our country by those who refuse to listen, accept, and love. I refuse to accept oppression. I refuse to witness my ethnicity stand on the verge of open ground, shot and targeted. I will not remain silent. I refuse to remain silent. The voices of our people must be and will be heard by those who refuse to listen and by those who openly embrace. Our demand for justice will not cease till we receive righteousness. We will not be suppressed and we will fight for those victimized and for those vulnerable. We will stand proud and let our stories be told that we are not a virus, that we are proud representations of the Chinese and not what they claimed us to be, because we deserve justice no matter how long it will be.
Waiting in wind. Billowing sails cast gales to the mast where I stand. Wind is a clever taste in my mouth, rising from teeth cliffs to the ridges of my forehead, softly fingering, coaxing, hair by hair. Like minnows, they fly beside molten colors, the first breath of sun in the sky. But with a jolt, I fall to the deck. The wind that teased my hair whips my skin, slashes my eyes because we're sailing in reverse. I clutched the bar to heave myself up, but I lurched backwards. Molten colors bleed to a future mother, tortured by her own womb, wrenching her amniotic sac against the straightened hook of a hanger. I don't need the wind for my body to shake. Trembling, I reach for my crewmates. I can't unsee it, nor free it. The girl hunched alone, bleeding until a nurse comes and says, I hope this teaches you a lesson. But that was 50 years ago, right? And she bleeds before me. The crimson sharpens, licking the screeching wind. Can't you feel her pain? I plead with it. But it thrusts me backward still to the hangar. Because what protection do I have when privacy is no longer mine, but ink from a pen held in the fists of wind, fists I cannot see, but feel with every aching blow they lash. From the steps that rise on our backs, masked injustice. For how can I wade in currents the wind blows, when I cannot row through inked-in tradition, charcoaled America? Still waiting in the wind, I peel my gaze to the howls that spoil my breath away, to introduce myself, for likely it never heard of sailors like me, us who were never deeply rooted in American history. So I glare as the breeze tears my arms and swallow the wind whole.
Blue skies,
The sun rises from the horizon, peeking from the fine line separating land and sky. Mountains surround me, wrapping its luscious green arms in an embrace that fills my ears. It fills my ears with the wind's whistles, the flowers' giggles, the trees' whispers. All around me, I feel the earth's unwavering intricacies, each little detail a building block, forming every rock and lock. The way every atom and element structure creates a balance that dictates life on Earth, or how the exact distance and tilt of our planet gives her the talent of birthing life. Even through strife, she protects us. She shields us from the unknowns of the universe. Isn't she magnificent? But if our planet is so special, why do we treat her as if she is not essential? We pollute her air, destroying natural habitats without repair, unprepared to face the consequences of our own wrongdoing. Too many times humans have taken advantage of our planet, not realizing that by killing off Earth's beauty, eventually we will kill off ourselves. Earth is our home, a small fraction of world protecting us from the unknown, all alone in a universe we barely know. Our planet has grown and raised us. Now it's our turn to fix our wrongs and grow and raise her.
Breathe. There is a pattern we burn into the night sky.
And it will not be of chemical, but compassion for all that is light.
Last year I woke up and the sky was tangerine, sick with smoke. Because we live in a world where things are valued more dead than alive, and where we value today so much we don't even think about tomorrow.
But in less than 12 years, we'll be running out of tomorrow. So tell me, how do we redefine value? Humans are warming the planet.
Smoke days replace our parents' snow days. Being told that children are the future, uncertain if we have one in store. Look around you. Breathe if you can. It's code red for humanity.
Hazy skylines, the redness of the map. Plumes of black smoke billowing, mixing with lavender clouds and orange flame. Yellowed lawns in my neighborhood.
The taste of burnt toast in my mouth, part of my community lost, as decades of damage, destruction, and hate come down like a meteor that never saw space. We must be united to fight it.
We must all take accountability, reduce CO2 and methane emissions to zero. We have caused this. We are the only ones who can fix this. We can have a sustainable future.
Sitting in my bedroom, staring at the screen, wondering if this is always what I'll see. Longing for action, longing for change.
Saving the world from climate change.
Right now, I'm learning, struggling, and exploring, and I want to make a difference, to know I'm safe. I want to live in a world with no pollution, with rainbows in the skies.